So it's actually the lion's mane is stimulating the production of nerve growth factor instead of actually supplying the nerve growth
Yeah,
factor.
absolutely. It is stimulating your body's own production of it. So, and that's one of the things I like about natural remedies is the wonderful way that they work with the human body instead of coming in with external sources of things to force the body to do something, to provide something to the body, the body's
Well, it's
supposed to
like
be doing for itself.
medications. They're always forcing the body and
Absolutely.
not working with the
Right.
body.
And lion's mane is very much working with the body, strengthening the body, stimulating the production of something that's necessary for health and healing in this regard.
Now, and I hear about a product called Amylobin 3399. Exactly what is that concerning lion's mane?
Well, initially the work was done with lion's mane, where they used, as I mentioned, they used it in a soup. They used it as cookies. They fed it to rats in one study. That was one of the earliest studies where they basically fed rats that had dementia induced in them, and they put them in this basically big tub, and they measured how long it took them to find this little hidden platform in there. And they were able to measure the learning and the memory and the responses when they would bring them back in and everything. And they found that the rats that were fed this lion's mane actually learned quicker, had better memory, and were able to do that. They also then compared it to Aricept, a pharmaceutical drug, that's commonly used for dementia and Alzheimer's treatment. And they found out that the two worked really well together in helping improve that memory and that learning response. So, that horicinone component of the amylobin 33.9 basically stimulates the nerve growth factor, which does that repair protection. And then it seems to have a direct action on the beta amyloid plaque or amyloid beta plaque, whatever your preference is.
Right, exactly.
Which is the plaque buildup, which creates a lot of the problems, free radical damage, the other stresses and strains, and it kind of really waxes and clogs up the system, so to speak, in the brain.
Yeah, it's basically taking all your nerve fibers and just tangling them up with like a big knotted spaghetti ball. Basically.
It's like taking a bunch of clutter and throwing it in there. Things just aren't going to work as well. It's going to clog things up. The membranes aren't going to function as properly, and then it's going to create a lot of damage. So it's going to increase free radical damage. These substances called endoplasmic reticulum, which are these little channels inside the cell, can damage them in other ways, and that's really important for protein use in the cells and things.
Well, how does lion's mane affect Alzheimer's, or what other benefits does lion's mane have for Alzheimer's patients besides the nerve growth factor?
Well, the ricinones are going to give you the nerve growth factor stimulation, which is going to give you that beta amyloid protective or even reversing action. What was more recent is studies were done, and they discovered a substance which they actually called amylobin, which they found has another action to it, which may be even more profound. I know everybody focuses on Alzheimer's dementia and they think beta amyloid plaque.
Right.
But what they are finding more and more now, that it may not be at the actual plaque itself, it's damage that's associated with the plaque. And it's that free radical damage and other types of stresses and strains in the brain, which are then killing off all the other healthy cells in there. And that's really key, because a brain cell that gets damaged, that's no longer functioning, or that gets actually killed off, it becomes a much more difficult situation to treat in that regards. So this new compound, this amylobin substance, which actually has a protective action on healthy cells, may be even more profound, as far as its lifelong impact for Alzheimer's and dementia than the plaque direct action, so to speak.
So lion's mane actually has an antioxidant protection to it.
It is an antioxidant itself, and it seems to stimulate the body's own production or protective elements in the healthy cells, so they don't get damaged from either that free radical damage. There are a number of things that can damage cells in the brain, hyperactivity of those immune cells, they call it cytotoxicity, the endoplasmic reticulum, cell membranes, their proteins, Dow proteins. I mean, it gets really complicated. Brain chemistry is ridiculous. I start reading it, and I eventually start going a little crazy.
I'm the same way, because I find brain research to be amazing. But like you said, you end up with so much mumbo jumbo of everything. This is connected to here, and this does this, and then they find out something else. But we talk so much about dementia and Alzheimer's, and we're talking about lion's mane and the nerve growth factor that it can help reproduce within our own brain. And you had mentioned Aricept, which is the mainstay drug for people with Alzheimer's. It really doesn't regenerate anything. It's kind of slowing down the progression. That's all it really does. Now, for those people on Aricept, can they take the amylobin along with it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what the research seems to indicate, that there's a synergy between the two, that each of them will work better because there's different actions. I would tend to argue, and this is a guess to some degree on my part, that the lion's mane has some protective actions from some of these really strong pharmaceutical drugs that we're using for these neurodegenerative conditions and things. So,
now, can anybody take the amylobin if they're not diagnosed with Alzheimer's?
Yeah, and that's a real tricky question because a study was just done actually a few months ago where they rated the fear level of Americans as far as certain diseases, and Alzheimer's came up number two, cancer's number one,
Right.
and the second most disease that we're afraid of is Alzheimer's. The trick or the catch with Alzheimer's is this is not something you catch today or yesterday. You don't walk outside and have someone sneeze on you and walk away with Alzheimer's
It's
or
a
dementia.
it's a gradual decline.
Yeah, and it takes place over years, and I would even argue over decades. Now they can start measuring that probably 10 years or so in advance, but if you may not notice those changes. So in my regard, my concern is I don't want to come down with this. I don't want to get to the point where there's already damage, where I'm already noticing a memory decline, perceptual mood, a number of other things that can incapacitate the individual. So I say if you have any risk or any concern in that area, I think it's a useful remedy to add to your regular mix.
Well, that's what I was wondering because I like taking lion's mane myself, and because I've read the research from Dr. Kawagishi, and just the protective effect. But when you read about nerve growth factor and thinking, oh my gosh, here we are, we could actually have the possibility of regenerating nerve tissue and saving what we have for a much longer time. And reading about some of the researchers who have done some of the studies, one of the researchers, she's 102 years old.
Yeah.
She takes the nerve growth factor by eye drop, which is really strange. And no, ladies and gentlemen, you can't buy the eye drop. But when she uses it now, she says she's 102. But she said my thinking capacity, my brain capacity is better now than it was 40 years ago.
That's unheard of, isn't it? It's amazing.
Completely
in that
unheard of.
regard.